President Obama's overtime threshold upgrade has received a warm reception from Middle America on the whole. Yet could he go one step further in redistributing income? Former chief economist and economic advisor to Vice President Joe Biden, Dr. Jared Bernstein, joins me. Now, if you were still advising this administration, tell me what would be that next policy move in addressing wage and income disparity?
Well, I would probably think a lot less about redistributing income, that is, through taxes and transfers, that sort of thing, because I think that that's not really the heart of the problem. It's important, by the way, to have a progressive tax code, and we do, and we should protect that. But I think the issue is really the split between productivity growth and the compensation of the typical worker. And for that, what we really need is to increase the ability of workers to claim their fair share, the productivity growth that they're helping to create. That invokes things like the overtime rule. It invokes the idea of having tighter labor markets. It invokes the idea of making sure workers are amply skilled. Those are the kinds of policies that I would be pushing.
So when we talk about how to sort of revive the economy or get it, really picking up again, is manufacturing that meal ticket?
I think it would up to a point. I think we have to be realistic in the following sense. Pretty much every advanced country, even those that have a very successful manufacturing record like Germany, will find that the share of manufacturing employment as a share of total employment is coming down and coming down relatively quickly. That has something to do with productivity growth in the sector. However, and this is key, in the U.S. economy, we have run large and really, I think, very unfortunate deficits in our balance of trade, whereas a country like Germany has had surpluses. Those deficits, which have averaged between 2 and 3% of GDP for decades now, are a huge drag on demand in this country. And we should absolutely try to do something about that.
Okay, and whose responsibility is to get some of those measures put in place to address that disparity that you speak of?
Well, that's a good question. It's policymakers writ large. Now, that invokes everyone from our Federal Reserve in terms of making sure that monetary policy recognizes that we still have considerable slack in our job market. And thankfully, our Federal Reserve Chair, Janet Yellen, realizes that. But of course, policymakers on the congressional side here, the president, the administration, are often at odds and loggerheads, even to the point of political dysfunction in terms of implementing these kinds of ideas. And that's been a problem for us.
How far do you think filibustering is going to play in terms of putting forward those hurdles that are not going to allow the legislation you think is really needed to move forward?
The overtime rule, by dint of being a rule and not legislation, is something that the president can do without Congress. And anything the president can do without Congress is much more likely to happen. So that rule will, I believe, be in effect at some point in the near future.
Okay, all right. So moving forward, what is going to be sort of the deciding factor, do you think? Perhaps this election that's heating up right now, is that really going to move the conversation forward?
I think it will. I think that we shouldn't be too overly optimistic about that, because the election will decide where the American people are on this question that we've been discussing of the absence of broadly shared prosperity amidst growth. But in fact, that was the question of the last two elections, which the president won. So the electorate has numerous times endorsed this idea that they want to see our policymakers doing more to close the gap between productivity growth and the compensation of middle and low wage workers. The problem is that gridlock politics has blocked them, and there's no reason to think that that's going to be resolved by the next presidential election.